I'm not going to mince words. My friend Frank Hyder is a pretty dang good artist. And one of the things I've admired the most about his work is his restless innovation with materials. Frank is always exploring new possibilities for his art. And this quality becomes abundantly clear when you see his new show at the Projects Gallery. In recent years, Frank has been splitting his time between Philadelphia and a city which has become one of the great art centers of the world.
I've been spending the last 2 years an enormous amount of time in Miami and getting acclimated to a new studio and a new environment and meeting new artists and talking to people and seeing things. And one of the dynamic parts of Miami, it is without question the greatest street art I've ever seen. And every building is just covered with amazing, complex, interesting paintings. People go around and put up some part of a painting and someone else comes along and adds to it and then starts repainting it. And what happens is that some of these things take on almost an organic quality. And I noticed that that was a little bit like what was going on in my own work. And I said to myself, that's really a kind of an interesting thing, that I'm being affected by something that I just walk by on a daily basis.
What you think you see when you look at one of Frank's artworks is often very different from what it really is. These may look like paint on a white surface, but they're a lot more complicated than that.
This is a big sheet of mylar, right? So if you put this against the window, you could actually see through it, light would go through it. Then this is a digital print that I've made on tracing paper. I cut the print out and paste it straight onto the mylar first. And then I start to draw the landscape in relation to the cuts. I have no idea what it's going to look like until I start doing it. So it's really an improv piece, okay? Then I start painting back into the digital print. But because it's a digital print, you get some amazing kind of effects and details that you would never get in a painting. I get some really interesting effects that come from photography. I get some really interesting effects that come from painting. And there's a relationship between the printing process, the painting process, and then the next stage, which I call the improvisation process, slowly conceiving of a landscape that will fit the irregular cuts that have been made into the prints. And the end result is that there's an integration of the material because the collage becomes successful. That is behind that, but in this image, it looks like it's in front of. And then I go around and I'm using the paint, and it does all these really painterly things, which when it was installed on the stairway in Miami, you had to walk through the painting from one level of the hotel to the next. And frankly, with the light coming in, people found it rather exciting.
Using light in a creative way is a unifying theme for this show. This large piece was originally displayed in Miami over a window so that the mylar was backlit with natural light. This led Frank to more experimentation, and he eventually began embedding LED lights into art that was part painting and part sculpture.
All the pieces were dealing with this idea of light passing through the work. The other issue was the idea that color and black and white were really in a kind of dynamic situation. I'm very much interested in the human connection to landscape and a dynamic that is positive and works. And I think when you look at these paintings, the color of these heads, which are vivid and ritualistic and clearly referred to native paint styles, at the same time, the fact that the landscape is in black and white it brings the landscape back into focus. If it's not in harmony with the figure, we're in disharmony with nature. And I think that as a theme and as an idea starts to get at the core of my interest in work. And if there's any kind of mysticism or magic that I'm looking for, it's in that poetry that exists between the natural world, the metaphysical world, the spiritual world, and the real world that we live in, the modern world. And in the end, when someone asks me what do I call it the frontier. The frontier is metaphorical. On one level, I'm referring to the fact that it's as if you've come to the edge of the forest and you're right on the edge of a new land, and you look into the forest and the face of the people in the forest looks back at you. And on the other hand, it was a frontier for me, an artistic frontier, a place that I hadn't quite been to before, a place I was willing to push into and explore.
Well, Frank, my friend, please never stop exploring, because what you come up with is simply breathtaking. Thanks for another great show.